Yay!
Okay, so first we have Yossi and Lynn talking about Spire and Federation.
Yeah, Yossi, go ahead.
Okay. So there is an issue that one of the users in the community opened, and he's trying to set up. It's not like a real production environment, but more like playing around with the configuration where you have say, Spiffy Federation. If you open the issue, you can see some nice diagram that he put together. And in addition to that, he also has, his name is Sudeep, he's supposed to mention that he will be here today, right?
Hey, yeah, I'm in.
Oh, okay. Hi.
Hi.
Awesome.
So
Yeah, do you want to describe the problem, Sudi, since you are
yeah.
here? Then Yossi maybe can talk about his investigation.
Yeah, sure. So what I'm trying to do is to basically have two separate trust domains, and then I have two clusters. And the very good thing that Spire does is we can now separate the service discovery, and then we can have a separate component called Spire, which can take care of the entire certificate management. And that is exactly what I'm going to do here. And Spire, with the latest 1.14, I think have released Federation, wherein they can actually send bundles to both the clusters and then populate the envoys. And I was thinking, why can't I use these concepts and then create two separate trust domains, and then have two separate clusters on these two trust domains and talk to each other, and let Spire take care of the federation, and Istio take care of the service discovery between them. So that is the top level thing that I'm trying to achieve here.
Yeah, Sudi, thanks for describing the problem. Does that mean you want to have one trust domain per cluster, but both of them you want to put them in the same mesh? So that means one mesh will have two trust domains. Is that what we are trying to achieve?
Right. Yeah. Multi-mesh. Correct. Yeah. So Spire can further be extended to have more number of clusters in one trust domain, but the bigger idea is to basically have a separation between the certificate management and the service discovery that Istio can do beautifully, and Spire can do very beautiful certificate management. So use both the things, and then federation. Why? Because there are use cases where things could be in two different trust domains. Let's say one is on Google and one is on Azure and one is on Amazon, and obviously you will not have the same route, but you would want your application to move across all of these clouds seamlessly without you worrying about public interfaces, private interfaces. So that is the big top level thing that I'm trying to achieve here. Yeah.
Can I ask, what exactly do you mean by federation? I mean, do you mean that the workload A in Azure can talk with workload B in Google?
Yeah, so there could be cases where there's a big application, and then you basically isolate them into two separate clusters, and then one on, as you said, one in Azure and one in Google, and then allow them to talk without you worrying about the public interfaces, right? Because everything is MPLS. Yeah.
That's already supported, as far as I know, through mesh config. In mesh config, you can specify as many root CAs as you want, and you can specify as many trust domain aliases as you want. So I think it's working perfectly fine with these two APIs. Using Spire API is a different story. And
yes. So the Spire agent is providing this configuration that you just mentioned through the Linux socket, right? I mean, if it, let me share actually, instead of view. scrolling down.
Are you sharing something?
And yeah,
Yusuf,
Yeah,
feel
one
free to take
second.
over the presentation.
By the way, are you using the same CA or different CA for each trust domain?
I can't see if you're sharing something. Oh, there it is.
it's
I'm
a
pretty
different
sure
CA.
you were using different, yeah.
Yeah,
So
different
it's
CA,
like
but
it's like primary for both for the Istio and for the Spire. So it's like totally different clusters with different deployments of Spire and Istio. And the federation is on the at the level of the Spire itself. So if you take a look at the for example the root CA, this is the configuration that we got from one of the sidecars running on the Istio. So the configuration, the secret that came from the Spire agent is actually including the two trust domains. I mean the AWS with the root CAs for each one of them. So configuration wise, it seems like everything is correctly configured. But the only problem that we have is that
The
these
validation.
match subject alternative names. So this is the default entry that you get for the current trust domain where the sidecar is running. But until you actually add alternative
Trust domain
alternative
alias?
trust domain aliases, sorry. Then you get like an additional entry over here. Actually there is an example down here.
yeah, but that works as intended
Like
because
this one.
yeah.
And only then you are able to communicate to make the connections, mutual TLS connection between the different trust domains. So the question is, at least for my side, is it as expected? I mean, is it what one more extra step that users are required to configure in the mesh config, adding those aliases in order to make it work? Or is it something
Sure.
that we are, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, trust domain alias, the main purpose is for when you try to migrate from one mesh to the other, you want to treat the two trust domain exactly the same. So that you don't need to modify your authorization policy and you don't need to modify the secure naming. It will make the migration smooth. But is this your purpose trying to treat the two trust domain the same? Like I see you have one google.com
No.
trust domain, the other is AWS trust domain. Do you want to differentiate them in authorization, or do you want to consider these are the same domain?
Yeah, I want it to be like considered as separate trust domain,
Separate.
and yeah, and I want communication to happen to them
Okay,
in accordance to the policy.
What does it mean separate? I mean, it's either they are trusted and can communicate with each other, or they are not. From authorization policy, you can apply whatever rules you want on authorization policy, but from handshake, if they are not, the handshake would fail. I mean, if they are not in the same domain, so you cannot have it both ways.
I think currently we have one mesh corresponds to one trust domain. But what you are trying to achieve is one mesh has two trust domain, and you want to have the same service discovery. So you want to consider them as the same mesh, but you want to have multiple trust domains, and you want to have them communicate with each other, right?
You mean that we don't have, I mean, even if original intent of aliases was to help migration, reality is that trust domain aliases define aliases for the trust domain and allow a mesh to have multiple trust domains. I mean, regardless of the original intent, that's the behavior.
Yeah, but the problem is in the authorization policy, you cannot distinguish the two trust domain, right? If you have one identity called google.com, full, and the other one is AWS full,
you
and
can,
these
you
two
can.
will be considered the same.
You can actually do the if you're using the SPIFFE, the full SPIFFE qualified name. I believe the authorization policy is allowing you to distinguish.
The authorization policy basically consider both are the same identity.
Are you
That's
sure?
why, yeah, that's why it's continue working.
So Nimi, can we ask a clarification question? So
yeah.
By the way, what you are raising is exactly why we want to bring this to the work group meeting, so that we can understand the impact of trust domain alias. It's working, but I think what you are saying is, if I configure trust domain alias for Google and AWS.com, if I set authorization policy to say only the sleep in AWS.com can talk to the hello world in Google.com, if I have the other ABAC policy config such as so, the Istio would actually allow maybe sleep from Google.com to also talk to helloworld.com. Hello world, is that what
Yes.
you are saying, that it can differentiate?
Yeah, that will be the end result. So Google.com sleep will also have the same permission.
I would double check, because I remember I tested once exactly for this. I mean, in the authorization policies, there is a match for the sun, for the exact sun, and at least when I tested, it was properly, doing a string compare between the sun in the certificate and the one in the policy, and was not doing any kind of aliases. I mean, if you're using authorization policies, namespace or name, yes, I agree with you. It will be independent of the trust domain. But if you use a fully qualified name, it should be able to distinguish between the two.
I think the original purpose was to treat the two trust domain the same, so that when you are doing migration, you don't need to modify your authorization policy.
Original intent, yes, but my understanding is that
unless the implementation has some difference.
Let's check the implementation, but I think the most people use service account and namespace in the authorization policy, and for those it's reasonable to have trust domain is any in the aliases. But if you use because explicit SAN also means you can put any non-SPIFFE URL, you can put domain names, you can put other things in the.
Yeah.
And as far as I know, they go to a different code pattern, not the one where it's doing the trust alias.
Yeah, I can double check with the code. Yeah, but I think the problem that was raising today, which is multiple trust domain, which also has multiple CA under the same mesh. I don't think we formally support it today, but
no, actually, Istio added support for that. I think a couple of release back.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is when Istio introduced multiple trust domain, is added through a mesh config called I think it's called a CA certificates, where you can specify your root CA. But in the case of spell, it's not relevant, because in the case of spell, the spell agent would talk to the spell server to, get the certificate, get it signed. Like Yossi was saying, before he configured trust domain alias, the root CA already had Google.com and also AWS.com already from the spell agent. So that's all configured properly.
I wouldn't say properly. So I think that's misconfigured properly or improperly, because in Istio, the mesh admin is the one that decides who is allowed to talk with who, not something that is running per node. So Spire agent, yes, they have ability to configure routes, but it's not their business to configure, to design for the entire mesh what is the configuration. So I think doing it in mesh config is a proper way to do it, and that's what the mesh admin will decide what to trust and what not to trust for each cluster. And the bug is actually in the Spire agent that is actually bypassing what the mesh admin is doing.
Actually,
go
ahead.
Go ahead. You go ahead first.
No, I was just going to say, Costin, to your point, I completely agree if Istio is the CA, but in the case of spell, I don't believe Istio is the CA, right? I don't even think Istio is the RA in this case. So
there is a difference between who is a CA, and you can have any CA. You can put CA address, or you can use platform-specific CA, or mount secrets, or whatever. That's how you get certificates and who signs your certificates. Who you trust is a completely different thing. I mean, there's a list of CAs, roots, and trust domain you trust, that's the mesh admin that decides. You can get a certificate with a a root CA that is not valid. That's fine. The communication will break, but that's a completely different configuration.
Question actually, so two things here, right? So one thing is I try to do it via mesh config, it fails unless and until you do aliases. That's the only way to make it work. And if we delegate it to Spire, it does not work the way you are mentioning. First thing, and second thing is the dynamicity, right? So in this dynamic world, you definitely want to move things from one to the other and all that. And in that case, it's a cumbersome process to do a init again. Instead of that, if it could be a CRD, which is more dynamic and then which can have RBAC provided to the platform engineers are the one who is basically managing the platform. So that way you can keep the dynamicity, and then you can also keep the separations separate, concerns separate, and that would provide the best kind of effect. And the CRD that I'm talking about should exactly tell what are the other trust domains that you are trusting, and then which will be in line with whatever you do it on Spire. I think there's a lot of benefit in like segregating it, but I mean, things are not that good.
And I completely agree with you. I mean, if we don't do it dynamically, it's a bug. I mean, as far as I know, right now in the current version, and I think it was introduced 1 or 2 versions ago, proxy config is pushed. So if you make a change to mesh config, in particular for the certificates, for the roots, it will be pushed to all workloads without having to restart. I don't know if alias is in this situation, but we can easily fix it.
Oh, I'm pretty sure alias is in a situation, so you can make a change to mesh config of trust domain alias and just wait a minute or two. It would be propagated. Yeah,
it should be. It should be. Yes. Yeah.
But I mean, that is. I'm not sure if that's the right way to basically do it, or should it be a CRD, because that's the init configuration and running this scripts again.
It's not an init.
It's actually you can think of it as a Istio operator customer resource, right? Because all the contents in mesh config can be part of Istio operator, and then you can just apply that resource without Istio is not going to restart any of the components that's not changed.
Let me give you a slightly different answer. Sorry, so it is a CRD. We have a proxy config CRD now. So the CAs are in proxy config, which is a CRD. And we are trying to migrate from mesh config to proxy config CRD. But even if it's in the config map is reloaded automatically. So it's treated as a CRD. It's automatically reloaded, automatically pushed.
Got it. So 2 things here, right? So many of the, so we don't use what is it called, Istio to instantiate. So I'm very sure we use Helm charts, or there will be a lot of people who use Helm chart. So so doing this needs a different level of authentication authorization to basically repave the cluster here, versus some other CRDs which can be changed more dynamically and will have more freedom.
So by the way, Helm can work with the Istio operator too. And if that configuration is supported in proxy config, like Austin was saying, you can just apply the proxy config resource.
Okay.
What you propose here, so let me take a step back here. I mean, I completely agree with you that it would be ideal to have a CRD that is configuring the root of trusts and what CA to use. However, I don't know if that's Spire. We can take a dependency on Spire to do that and tell people, hey, if you want to configure that, you must use Spire. I don't think we should have a dependency on each CA. I mean, Cert Manager define its own, Spire define its own, and Istio have to integrate with them because it will be a nightmare for users. I don't think Istio should define it because we are definitely not a CA or in the business. I mean, we are accidentally in the business of configuring it. So in reality, it's the business of Kubernetes to define such configuration. I mean, JK has one such CRD. And hopefully the Kubernetes community will come up with and I don't really mean if she's involved with any discussion or if there is any progress on that, but I wouldn't kind of start fragmenting or having Istio do another one-off or add extra complexity or defining its own. instead of trying to push more on the Kubernetes community to do that stuff. And if we have any bugs, we definitely should fix it in proxy config CRD or the other one and pushing it.
So I have a question regarding to secure naming. Does this current solution you proposed, how in this solution, how do you configure the secure naming?
I'm not very aware of what secure name is.
Yeah, the secure naming is the one showing in the screen, right? So there is a subject alternative name match. Basically, when the TLS connection is being constructed, it will verify, for example, the server side match the same in that. So that's
Okay. Yeah, I think that's still based on the Kubernetes service account name, if I understood correctly. I don't believe Spell does it differently. Costin, do you know? You're muted, Costin.
Yeah, I think Spire has some, I mean, with the bundle, I think they can also do some extra stuff where they can verify that the particular identity and certificate are, in Istio, if you have a list of trust domain aliases, a list of CAs, they're all treated as two sets and independent of each other. In Spire, I think you can make sure that, CA from Azure is associated with a trust domain from Azure. That's, I think, the main difference.
Yeah, they have the attestation,
The
right? They can
attestation,
test the image. They have like a bunch of more validation than what we can do. But I think they are leverage like the Istio service account and all that to form that SAN, which Lei, I believe what you saw when Yossi present, that's exactly the same SAN as you would have if you're using Istio as the CA.
I think when Yoshi presented, so in the SAN, right? So it has a domain name and also the, for example, the namespace, the service account. So in that case, with this federation scheme, I'm not sure this requires a change or not. No change, or it's just no impact on the secure naming.
Only positive impact. Only positive impact. No negative impact on secure naming.
Yeah, there's no issue with that. The only issue is that we couldn't pass the validation for the alternative matching.
Yeah, I don't think Spire has anything to do with the secure naming. Secure naming should be just what Istio is already doing, getting from the Kubernetes API server.
That's a list of service accounts for the particular service.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But when they verify the certificate of the peer, they can do this extra check that AWS.com trust domain is associated with the AWS root CA, which is not something we do normally in Istio. But on the other side, that's only one direction. The other direction, they have no way to do it because the check is done afterwards.
Yeah. So
I don't think it's.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with what Costin suggested. Yeah, so you can use Spire as one CA provider if that's what you are trying to do. And for Istio itself, we cannot rely on Spire. Yeah, so the use case you just mentioned for one mesh to support multiple trust domain, if there's any gap, I think we need to be able to properly bridge the gap to make sure it's working properly.
So yeah, I think what we kind of concluding is so there's definitely a gap between aliases versus where the mesh config, where we provide the CA and all the other trust domains. So those things are not working. I think that is something that probably needs to be relooked, so that we can move the configuration from aliases to the mesh config.
Yeah, the CA certificate. So I think number one probably is worthwhile to see trust domain alias, which solve the problem, but does it bring the unique identity problem that Limin was mentioned across the two trust domain, right? So we should, if we can still do like from the sleep from AWS.com, only can call the hello world on the google.com, but not the sleep from the google.com called the hello world on google.com. So that the discussion Carsten and Limin was discussing, right? So if we can honor that with trust domain alias, I think that's a reasonable approach. If not, if trust domain alias is designed to just for migration among multiple trust domain, so that it bypasses all the validation, maybe using CA certificates and provide like the PAM file, the contents of the PAM file for the root source is the right approach. And I know, Sudi, you haven't got it working. I don't think Yossi got it working. Maybe Yossi haven't tried it yet. So
so I have tried I've definitely tried the mesh config, which did not work.
But you didn't specify the PAM file content, did you?
I have not, because PAM file is not with me. It is with Spire. I mean,
yes, but what Carsten
and it is all managed up.
I know, but Carsten was saying it still wants to know that information too, if I understood it correctly. Because one thing is Spell have the control.
That is not even populated to all the envoys, right? Because envoys are populated by Spire. The only thing that needs to be told to Istio is that these are the additional trust domains that you should trust. That's all I think.
I think that's a bit of a bug in the integration with Spire. I mean, the fact that Spire doesn't respect Istio settings.
Right.
So normally, yeah.
If you can fix that, then maybe we can have some headway here.
I think the problem is really to discuss with the people working on the Spire implementation and find some common ground. Basically, I mean, either they respect our configuration, basically read mesh config or get something from Istio to, because that's a bug. I mean, the fact that you put something in public roots in Istio mesh config and Spire doesn't respect it, that's clearly a bug. So either they read mesh config or they provide some way to automatically update mesh config with their roots, because they have their own configuration for the roots. Either is fine, but I wouldn't put it on Istio side to because we cannot really integrate with all the CAs.
Yeah, that's exactly my first impression. I think Rob also sent in the chat. I thought Spell only does like a attestation and do send the CSR request, get the certificate signed. And here Yossi mentioned to me, look, it actually populates the root cert and the root cert in the Envoy config. So I was pretty surprised on that. So Max, who implemented the Spell integration with Istio, is on vacation. So I'm going to relay this information to him and let him know so he can watch the recording too.
So in the current Spire-based implementation, the trust anchor is returned by the Spire agent, right? Is that correct? So basically, it's through SDS, and the trust anchor is returned as part of the SDS response. And it's from Spire agent. So if that's the case, I think the Spire agent can simply read the CA certificate from the mesh config. Then I think and plus setting the trust domain alias, then the problem should be solved, right? I think the problem arises from the Spire agent to make its own decision, say, okay, the trust anchor is this and S, Y, and Z, but in fact, it shouldn't do that. It should read from the CA certificate configuration from mesh config.
Actually, that is a lot of different touch points to touch. I mean, the more things can be done programmatically, or if there's some kind of integration that can be done, would be best, because touching so many configurations, one in Spire, one in Istio, is
But
really tough
yeah,
to
but
manage over
Spire
time.
is part of, in this case, Spire agent is part of Istio, right? It should honor the Istio CA certificate configuration in the mesh config instead of make its own decision independently. I don't know how this decision is made. For example, this configuration in the Spire agent, it will return CA certificate S, Y, and Z. How is that configured? Or I guess it's not configured through Istio.
No, it's not through Istio, but I think the code in Istio agent is merging. So I don't think it's so broken. It's just that Spire will add additional. I mean, unless
yes, that's
the
the additional part is the part I'm referring about. This doesn't seem to be consistent with the Istio CA certificate configuration. We should have only one way instead of multiple ways. Otherwise, it may have inconsistent issues, right?
That's what I was suggesting to upstream it to Kubernetes community and to let them handle it and define one configuration to rule them all.
Yeah,
I
I
was
think we should
thinking-
look at how Istio agent functionality can also be improved. Yeah,
So I was happy about the fact that we are abstracting things away from the base and then taking it out to Istio and Spire. But if we go down to the base, that adds another layer of complexity. Yeah.
It adds a bit of complexity, but at least it's one. I mean, the problem is that everyone is trying to define certificates, roots, and everything. I mean, Istio, Spire, Cert Manager, Google CA, everyone is.
Yeah, I think there is actually more things on the security policy side we need to, if we want to officially support multiple trust domain per mesh. For example, if you define one authorization policy saying all the workloads in namespace full is allowed to access my service, but how do you know namespace full refers to which trust domain if you have multiple ones? Originally, I think the assumption is the mesh has its own trust domain. So it's basically referring to the mesh trust domain. So in order to support multiple trust domain, we actually need to extend the authorization policy. For example, to include a trust domain property there.
I don't think so. I mean, I think the current policy is pretty good. Trust domain aliases are treated as aliases, and that works. I mean, we tested for migration, so it works.
No,
it's just a permanent migration.
Yeah, for example, I want to say namespace full, all the workloads in namespace full can access my service. And I am actually referring to google.com on the google.com trust domain namespace full, not aws.com. So I need to be able to specify that in the policy. That's the part I'm.
Yeah, that's why I said I tested in the past and it was working. So if you use a fully qualified, SUN.
Yeah, I mean, not fully qualified SUN, also for the namespace level.
Well, that's not possible, of course, but I mean, that's advanced configuration, and they can just put the full SPIFFE URL if they're that advanced, then they need this kind of power.
Yeah. But we also have the namespace level authorization policy, right? This should also work as well.
Yeah.
So namespace based authorization, you don't specify the full qualified domain, trust domain?
We don't have the trust domain property in the authorization policy right now. I'm thinking we should add it. Yeah, I am also thinking for the multiple trust domain per mesh functionality support. I think currently it's not complete. Go ahead.
No, I mean, it works today if you use fully qualified, and since this is a very advanced one, probably we should not bother with another revision of the API, because there are so few users that need to deal with that.
We probably need to support this officially. But we can. I think we can look at the bug again to see what are the actual things missing.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. I think if the trust domain alias was as what Costin is saying, I think Sudi, that's probably your most preferred approach, because that would allow you to kind of rely on the spell configuration and then still honor the multiple trust domain and still be able to honor the boundary in RBAC rules. And
Yeah, I mean, I think what Lemon was saying, that
Mhm.
that is also an important consideration, because
Yeah.
we definitely want to treat different trust domain as different, but with fully qualified name, we might want to test.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, the current
And-
transaction policy can work. It's just you have to use the fully qualified SPV identity.
Yeah.
Right.
But if you want to make a more advanced feature, like a namespace level authorization policy also work, then we need to add more features there.
Yeah. Makes sense.
And are we also basically taking one action, basically talk to the Spire community to see whether they want to populate the mesh config, so that the PEM and the trust domains are automatically populated, so that we don't really need to do the aliases.
Yeah, I think that would be even better. Yeah, so if spell agent can process the mesh configuration based on what mesh admin specified, yeah.
Yeah, I think the Spire agent should get the trust anchor from the CA certificate setting in the mesh config. I think that's the right direction instead of getting from somewhere.
Yeah, the only issue with that approach, though, I guess, is you kind of have to configure your CA certs in Spell, and then you also have to configure it in Istio, but it gives this the control that Costin
I don't think with
about.
that you don't need a configuration in Spire, right? You just
No,
simply
but,
read the CA certificate trust anchor from the CA certs setting from mesh config, and put that in the SDS response. I don't think it requires both, just one.
I mean, to answer that, right? I think it has many touch points, Lee. So we want to reduce it, right? So as I said, I mean, one good thing is to basically separate the what do you call the service discovery domain and the entire security being managed by Spire. That is actually very powerful. The only thing is this federation is not correctly configured, because of which we are having to use the aliases. So if you can fix that, I think the solution is really powerful, and it gives a lot of dynamicity, which is very much needed in today's world.
So
No,
for the fix of failures, are you saying that to automate the configuration of trust domain alias, for example, by figuring out the trust domain alias by through, I guess, passing the CA certificates in the mesh config, or you are talking about something else?
Yeah, I mean, aliases versus mesh config. I mean, whatever the community thinks is the right thing to do.
Yeah, I think maybe alias. Yeah, alias, as I said, was actually designed for a different purpose. Yeah, but yeah, I think for this feature, we will probably consider introducing something else. Yeah, but we need to review it and think of what are we going to introduce.
Yeah, because the RBAC rule today doesn't support trust domain as a configuration parameter, other than you specify the full SAM.
But specifically, full SAM is very powerful, and for advanced users, you should. I mean, it's much clearer to me if I specify the full SAM with whatever I want, because again, if you are an advanced user that goes to this level, it's better to not be confused about how trust domain will interact with domain aliases or whatever you said. It's exactly the thing, and
you have clarity too.
Yeah, I think it's more of a documentation issue, right? For example, if you have this trust domain federation feature enabled, and then you must specify the fully qualified SPV name in the authorization policy. And once if that's documented, I think it should work.
Yeah, exactly. So, by the way, Lei, to your point, I don't believe you can have spell to say, I don't configure root certain. So remember, spell exists without Istio, right? When people set up spell,
let me
they
clarify
have their root
that it will just work. But my point is the spy agent read the CS certificates from the CS cert configuration in the mesh config, but still
No, it doesn't actually.
It does.
No, it doesn't. No,
It doesn't.
it gets it from the Spire server.
No, but agent, last time I checked, I mean, when I wrote the code of that one, it merges what it gets from Spire with what is in a well-known location. So it will still work with Citadel and other things. If it changed, then probably that part is broken, but it would be good to test if it's still the case.
How about the Spire agent reconciles the trust anchor? So basically, it will get both from the Spire server and from the CA certificate in the mesh config, then reconcile it. For example, enlarge it because you have.
But I think use case is not to keep anything in Istio. I mean, there will be users who would like to merge, and which makes sense. But there will be users who don't want to merge, as in keep a separated architecture, right? So let's say if there's nothing, no PEM.
We do merge. I mean, I think we have at least one, the one self-signed.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, so one more question. You mentioned multiple trust domain per mesh, and is this trust domain always aligned with the cluster boundary? Yeah, for example, can you have one trust domain across multiple clusters, and some namespace belongs to trust domain, but the other namespace belongs to a different trust domain? Is that such a use case?
Yeah, so there are two questions. So one is like there could be multiple clusters in one trust domain, which is which I've not tried, but yeah, Spire has a nested architecture through which you can expand the trust domains.
Yeah, I'm asking about the use case, not Spire. What Spire provides. Do you have such a use case? Like,
yeah, I mean, so as an application, if they, as I said, I mean, there could be there are two different trust domains for sure. And if an application wants to have an isolated architecture, so they can isolate it in multiple clusters in one trust domain and then similarly on the other one. But they would like to still continue to talk to each other without worrying about the public interfaces. They will like all the authorization and authentication managed by Onwise, which is really powerful. I mean,
okay.
So that way we can expand and give the more power to the application owners, where they can choose to break their applications as much as they want, and whatever they want to scale, whatever you don't want to scale, you can do. But yeah, with proper trust bundle exchange via Spire, you can have MTLS across all your clusters.
Let's maybe have a separate meeting with, try to engage people from Cert Manager, Spire, Istio, because we need to solve it in a way that is, kind of, we again, taking a definition of Spire requires Spire, it's not really the proper way to do it for Istio, but if we can agree with a common API, common CRDs, that it's defining root certificates and at least root certificate. Let's solve the problem just for roots. What is the roots of trust that are supported in Kubernetes?
Yeah. I totally agree. I also think, Istio should provide its own story about the federation. Yeah.
Or get out of the business of let other, because we have the solution to the XKCD classic. Too many standards. Let's define another one.
Okay, so are we, for now at least, are we settled on this topic that we need an offline meeting? All right. So Ariane, you are up next. Is 9 minutes enough time for this graduation approval?
So the thing is, just a request from the TOC member to look at the PR again. A few days back, we found this unexpected behavior in the L7 deny policy. It was like blocking all the TCP traffic. So we have added a warning about that in the kubectl when someone applies the OGG policy and updated the docs for that. Please check the enhancement PR one more time, so that I'm planning to graduate the policies with 1.17. So like you guys can look into it.
Okay, so the ask is for the work group leads to re-examine this PR.
Yes.
I think this requires TOC approval, right? Not the work group leads.
Yeah, it requires approval from TOC.
It's an enhancement, Istio enhancement repo. Yeah.
So this promotes the rest of the security to stable other than pure authentication. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Eric, next topic is yours. Is Eric still online? Oh, no, he's dropped.
But it's
Okay, it's,
plain, yeah, it's a self-explanatory. Yeah, I vote for yes.
cancel next we do the Thanksgiving in the US. Everybody
Of
yay?
course, of course.
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
do that.
Okay, well, consider
yeah.
canceled.
And Christmas too.
Yeah, Christmas also. Yeah.
That has a month to go.
1 more month. Yeah, we can make the decision now. We
Planning
save, you know, the bandwidth of the meeting.
Oh, the week before
Regarding
Christmas.
cancellation, Francis, do you have the ability to cancel that on the calendar?
You know, I don't think so. I actually don't know who owns that calendar.
We have
So,
the authority to
What we
put
can
so on.
do, what I can do, just add it in notes here, right? And say
No.
meeting
Yeah, that's
We do
canceled.
need to get control of that calendar, though, one way or the other.
Do you know who created that calendar? Who has
I
owner
was
access to it?
contacting Maria in OSPO. I believe that they administer the calendar. If you do find out,
Oh, you mean
but
Maria, the Maria Google?
yes, Maria Cruz.
Oh, okay.
But I've
I'll
not heard
ask
back from her. I will ask if you do find out who owns it, can you get me added as well from my Gmail account?
Will do.
Thank you. Appreciate that. It'll just be good to get it back under control.
Yeah, it's getting a little ridiculous. Let's see. Oh. So Istio calendar.
I'm sure that Louis still has access, but whether he has time to be like adding and deleting events is a different story. It is possible Louis could add other owners, though. That might work.
Okay. Anything else?
Francis, what about the one in the Christmas, the December 21, I think. I think we
probably cancel too.
Yeah, we can cancel it
Let's
too.
see.
It's Wednesday, December 21st.
Well, there's 21st and there's also 20. Oh, actually, is there even one on 28? Okay, yeah, there is also the one in 28th. So both or just the 21st?
I vote for both.
Yeah, I would say both. I think people will be out.
Okay, let's do that.
All right. Thanks everybody for joining. Give you a few minutes
Thanks.
back.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Bye,
Bye.
folks. Hey, folks, is this the Istio Ambient Contributors Meeting?
Yep.
Okay. Did this meeting also have a problem with recording last week?
It did, yes. That's why they preemptively moved it to the TOC meeting as well.
Okay, good. Oh, wait, so Daniel, did you start the recording?
No, I just rejoined and it was still going.
Oh, shoot, because I did not, hold on.
You didn't end it from the last?